We are back and we're going to be discussing hierarchy first. So, what is hierarchy? Essentially, in its simplest terms, hierarchy is when you decide what's the most important part of your design. So, you're going to be working with different elements. You're going to be working with color and sizing, fonts. If you have imagery, you're going to be working with that as well. You have to decide what is the most important part of your design, and you have to assign the importance level of each element. So you have to decide, is the title the most important part? How are you going to express that it's the most important part? Are you going to make it bigger than everything else? Are you going to make it bolder? Are you going to make it really bright or really dark? There are different ways to give importance to something in design, and you have to, with hierarchy, what you're doing is you're deciding on the order of importance of each of those elements. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a quote. Everybody loves posting quotes, receiving quotes, sharing them. Quotes are big on social media. So we're going to work with a file that I'm going to show you exactly how I would work on this quote to make it look interesting and stay on brand for me. So when I'm working on any of my brand elements, usually I'll have my style guide open, and that's right here. So it has my logo that I can grab, my alternates that I can grab. It has all my typefaces that I use, and it also has graphic elements that I use, icons that I use. All my colors are here, and I also have another file full of icons. I'm huge on icons, as you can see. I love to illustrate, and I think illustrations and visual elements really help people to understand your message and to visualize it. So I'm big on icons as well. We're gonna work on this quote, on this file. I've set it up so that it's square. I'm doing an Instagram graphic. I set these files up at 1000 pixels by 1000, but I think that's gigantic. That's just the way that I set them up. I believe for other clients that I have, we set them up at 500 by 500. They're usually bigger files so that the quality isn't compromised when they're compressed and everything for mobile. So let's talk about, this is the quote that we have. Unless you have absolute clarity of what your brand stands for, everything else is irrelevant. And the quote is by Mark Baines. He's the global CMO at Kellogg Company. So there's nothing special in the way this is written out here. It's just the quote itself in black. So what we have to decide is, what's the most important part of this quote? For me, he's talking about having absolute clarity. So I think obviously the most important part of this is that section right there. Absolute clarity. Because unless you have absolute clarity, everything else is irrelevant. So it seems to me that is the most important part of this message, of this quote. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up this quote. I like to give, for my quotes, I do them differently. Pick a background color. Again, I have my background colors set up in here. So we're going to take this, since I already have it in here, but you would obviously pick a text box and do it that way. I just lost my tags. Here it is. If you're familiar with Illustrator, things are in front and behind each other. So this text was in the back. I obviously want this text to be bigger. So we're gonna make it a bit larger. I normally work on these at around 80 points. Let me see. That's probably too big. Let's try 60. And let's stretch out. Okay. I don't like hyphenations, so we'll take that out. Now, I don't like the black on the peach. That's not my brand. There's no black. I think probably white is what will work best. Maybe even one of these, like that peach is nice, but it's a little harder to read. So let's keep it white. And we said absolute clarity is what was the most important part. So we can do it by, the importance of it by changing the color. So right there, your eye is already drawn to absolute clarity. Now, I don't like that it's broken up. Absolute and clarity is on the next line. I don't like that. So let's try to move stuff around. I like that better. Unless you have absolute clarity of what your brand stands for, everything else is irrelevant. That's starting to look better. I do like it being a little bigger. Maybe we can make it bigger. Let's see. So here's another chance for us to think about hierarchy. The important part of this graphic is the quote. So there's no need for, obviously Mark Baines is important. He's the one that said the quote, but usually you want to tone his name down a bit because what you want people to focus on is the quote itself. So how do we do that? Obviously, one of the first things that we can try is to lower the size of the font that we're using for his name. So we don't have to, I still think that's a little bit big. So let's try 50 again. And let's have a look at it again. That to me looks nicer. Another way to do that is to have his name recede into the background. And so how do you make something recede? Well, the closer you have a color to the background, and I mean the closer in the actual color itself. So like these are two forms of peach. If you have a look at this compared to the white, let's put white. White comes forward and this peach recedes because it's closer to this background color. So what we'll do is we'll have that peach for Mark. It still shows up, but it's not prominent. This is the important part. Now, and this is something that, again, you can see in your style guide. I typically use work sans. So that's how we stay on brand. So now you see that the work you've done changes just a little bit because work sans is different than the font we had before. So here we can put it at 70. So now 70, I think I like. We can try to go a little bit lower, maybe. If you go lower, obviously you see it takes up less space, and when you align this and center it, there's more space around the quote itself, which I like. So what I do here is I make sure everything, the marquee is around everything so that when I align it, it's dead center. So this is a very simple way to work on a quote. Now, we can definitely leave that alone now. I like to differentiate this even a little bit further. I might want this in italics. Now, Work Sans does not come in italics. So the next font that I use is called Carla. And that one has a nice italic version that I want to use for just his name. And I want to, again, we're using hierarchy here. Here goes absolute and clarity now. So we're moving it again. We're back to center. And then, so if this is the most important part, this is the most important part, absolute clarity. The next most important part is obviously the whole quote itself, because you want them to know what you're saying about absolute clarity. So if those two things are the most important, in order, absolute clarity, the quote, what's the next most important thing? Obviously, the person who said it. So these two look the same. So what we can do is give Mark a bold italic that makes his name stand out a little bit more than his title. So we did all this with just one font. You don't have to go crazy doing 50 different types of font. Just all of this is one font. We used color, we used sizing, we used the font styles, bold, italic, to make this quote look interesting and to have hierarchy. The most important part, obviously, is absolute clarity. We used it with color. The next part is the quote itself, then Mark, and then his title. And it all fits within our brand. You see the colors, we use the same fonts. This quote is ready to go.